right. Thank you for those who are joining us for the Bible study tonight. I appreciate you being online to be a part of it. I see there's already a number of people in the comments. It's good to see that Eli is alive and doing well as the rest of you. So I appreciate you being here. It's good to finally get back into our study of wisdom. We had to skip over 1 week of study. We were going to do a look at the new year as far as our study of holidays, and we're going to try to understand how we should regard a new year. Maybe that's something we talk about another time, or at least the concepts behind that. Maybe we can talk about another time. But we want to go ahead and get back into our study of wisdom by starting into the direction of talking about foolishness. We spent a few weeks talking about wisdom and learning about the building blocks, the behavior, and so forth of a wise man, the blessing of being wise. And now this is almost a contrast to the blessing of being wise as we look at this idea of the folly of foolishness, this idea of where foolishness is manifest, how you see it, and where it's leading to, the dangers attached to it. So for that, we're actually going to be starting off in Psalm instead of Proverbs today. So we're going to be in Psalm 53. Yes, Psalm 53. I'm going to read the whole Psalm. It's only 6 verses. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. It says, Psalm 53, verse 1 through 6. To the chief musician upon Mahalath Maskil, a psalm of David. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Corrupt are they, and have done abominable iniquity. There is none that doeth good. God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand, that did seek God. Every one of them is gone back. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Have the workers of iniquity no knowledge, who eat up my people as they eat bread? They have not called upon God. There were they in great fear, where no fear was. For God hath scattered the bones of him that encampeth against thee. Thou hast put them to shame, because God hath despised them. Oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion. When God bringeth back the captivity of his people, Jacob shall rejoice, and Israel shall be glad. Now, this in Psalm 14, I believe Psalm 14, I don't think I have it written down here, but this and I think it's Psalm 14 are almost word for word. I mean, there's very little deviation between the two of them, or variation between the two of them. It's almost exact, the same psalm being quoted over again with just a few additions here and there. So I've chosen to use Psalm 53 as the foundation, though, as opposed to the other, because of the fact that Psalm 53, I think, speaks better to the two ideas I want to talk about today. And that's the folly of foolishness, the place where you're seeing foolishness manifest and seeing what it really looks like, is in how foolishness corrupts those that have it, those who have a foolish heart, and how it destroys those. It is the corruption and the destruction of those who have a foolish heart. And I ask you to please bear with me today. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just have a really cloudy head. I guess even though I slept pretty good on Sunday night, I didn't sleep so good last night. And so I still haven't caught back up on that sleep I was missing Sunday maybe. And I'm just not doing well with that. So anyways, if I stumble over my words or any of that kind of stuff, don't worry about me. I'm just still having a problem with my head being cloudy. I've drank plenty of coffee and all of that, and it's just not doing it for me. But anyways, keeping in mind that with these two main thoughts, that's what we're going to break down the passage by looking at, is that foolishness is the corruption of those that have it, and it is the destruction of those that have it. It's their corruption and their destruction. And you see that if you go back and reread verse 1, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Corrupt are they that have done abominable iniquity. There is none that doeth good. And you see this is supported all the way down into verse 3. God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand, that did seek God. Every one of them is gone back. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. So foolishness corrupts those, and I'll get into explaining that. In fact, let me just go ahead and do that. The issue of the fool, the highest issue of the fool, I mean, the heart issue is his heart. That in his heart he has said there is no God. And so we've talked about this, that the thing that really sets somebody on a path in terms of wisdom or foolishness is going to come down to their heart. And what's going to determine which direction your heart goes is going to come down to your view of God. whether you have a fear of God or whether you are touched by unbelief. And so maybe we should go ahead and throw up that wisdom chart for everybody so that you can remember this. So if you look at it, you have, this. If you look at it, you have the fear of the Lord, you have unbelief. A heart that's been touched by the fear of the Lord will gravitate towards wisdom, so that wisdom begins to grow in the heart. If wisdom's growing in the heart, understanding is also going to grow in the heart. They're going to go hand in hand together. It's just natural. The heart that's been touched by the fear of the Lord will proceed in that direction. A heart that's ruled by unbelief is going to proceed in the direction of being scornful and foolish. So to make sure you understand and appreciate those two contrasts, the basic definition of wisdom, the most simple boiled down is it's the ability to apply knowledge. Understanding is the ability to understand stuff. So wisdom gives you an ability to take what you know and use it. Understanding gives you the ability to break things down and understand how they work and so forth. It actually helps you in your ability to accumulate knowledge because it helps you to understand why things are the way they are. Scornfulness, which would be the opposite of that, is where someone who feels like they know everything already becomes unteachable. They don't have the ability to understand new information because they feel like they already know it all. They're already filled up. And that's why it produces pride, or it comes from a place where it's going into a strong pride, a proud and haughty spirit. Foolishness, in contrast to wisdom. If wisdom is a ability to apply knowledge, then foolishness is an inability to apply knowledge. The fool, because of the fact that he has said that in his heart there is no God, doesn't have a good worldview. His worldview is completely messed up, and he lacks an ability to actually look at the information in the world around him and then properly put that to use and know what to do with it. And that's why you see, I mean, if you think about this, you see this all around you. You have people who seem intelligent, like they're knowledgeable, they're educated and so forth, and yet they don't seem to know how to process the information. Like I can tell you some fact or information about the world. I can get into science and I can start talking to you about the fact that there are, planets and moons and stuff that break the laws of motion by the fact that they rotate backwards, or the fact that there's less than 10,000 years of dust on the moon. That the sun, if you reverse time and went back to how big it would have been since it's shrinking as it burns, if you reverse time, went back to how big it would have been more than 10,000 years ago, it would have been impossible for life to exist, and so forth and so forth. And someone with wisdom in their heart, even if you don't believe in God, has an ability to look at that and realize that, okay, something's not right with what we're being taught. Something needs to be addressed, that this information doesn't line up with the other information. You don't have to believe in God to be able to understand that. Someone who doesn't have that wisdom, that ability to look at the world and take the knowledge that's given and apply it, will then eventually reach a place. And this is where you see the contrast where foolishness eventually pushes into frowardness, because the fool doesn't have the ability to properly, rightly divide what information is being given to him. In the beginning, his issue is that he doesn't know how to follow after the truth. He doesn't know how to take the information and use it rightly. As that is allowed to go unchecked, and that's allowed to grow and produce more so in the heart, the fool becomes the froward. A froward being someone who's deceitful, someone who doesn't care about the truth. It's not that he doesn't know how to use the truth. He doesn't care about the truth. He's intentionally deceitful. He uses and manipulates the information for his benefit. And I think we all have seen that. We've seen people who, as they went on in this life and they've gotten to a place, they followed this path of not really caring about God, not really caring about the truth and so forth. They eventually reach a place where it's not that they don't know how to process or use the information rightly. They're intentionally using it wrong. And the best place to illustrate that, I didn't want to get into science so much tonight, but the best place to illustrate that is mostly when you look at, for example, evolution and things of that nature, the teaching that go with that, how contradictory they are to the truth and the evidence that's around it, and how that the people who believe it are mostly people who just don't know any better. They don't see and realize the issues with the information that's being given to them. There's a little bit of foolishness there, so that they're easily to be tricked in this. However, the people who are teaching it have went way beyond that, and to the point where they know. I mean, they're telling you that they can definitively prove that this person existed in history, and all they have is a little tooth. That they don't have a skeleton, they don't have bones, they have a tooth, and they've drawn an entire diagram of what this person was supposed to look like. And a foolish person is someone who just doesn't know what to make of what I just said, and they don't know what to do with it, so they just eat the lie. But the froward person is the one who knows what I just said and doesn't care. They would rather follow after the lie. So there's where, as far as trying to illustrate it in a relatively simple way, there's where the difference between someone who's foolish and someone who's froward comes in. And you see that in a stark contrast to wisdom, whereas wisdom is going to be seeking after the truth wholeheartedly because of that fear of the Lord. The fool is going to not really care about the truth. The fool's going to follow after their own heart and so forth, because of the fact that their heart is touched by that unbelief. And when you don't have a belief in God, you can very easily shape the world to fit your views. It's very easy for you to not care about what is actually true and what is actually right so much as what feels right. So I hope that makes sense. That gives you a little bit of foundation and explains the verse that the key issue, the real issue of the fool, is that the fool in his heart has said there is no God. This is supported by Proverbs 17:16. And I'll read this one. I can quote it to you, but I actually would rather read it. Proverbs 17:16. Wherefore is there a price in the hand of a fool to get wisdom, seeing he hath no heart to it? The problem of the fool, why he can't become wise, why he can't just magically one day start increasing in wisdom, is because he doesn't have a heart for it. The problem is his heart. That's where the whole issue stems from. Now, what happens when somebody allows their heart to go into this realm of unbelief, where it begins to become scornful, where it begins to become foolish, is that it becomes a corruptive force that radiates into their actions. It begins to go into the same way wisdom is going to go into your decision making. Someone who has wisdom in their heart is going to try to make wise decisions. Someone who has a foolish heart is going to make foolish decisions. It's just a natural thing. Your heart is going to affect that. That's why the Bible tells you to keep thine heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Who you are and what you're going to do is going to be determined by your heart. So because of that, the fool, his heart rules more so even than wisdom or truth or anything else would. Someone who has a wise heart is going to be primarily ruled by the truth. They're not going to be ruled by their emotions so much. They're going to be following after what's true. Whereas a fool is primarily going to follow after his emotions. And the evidence of that is that the Bible says he that trusts in his own heart is a fool. So the Bible teaches you someone who's quick to follow their heart and trust their heart and so forth is foolish. A wise person, and it's going to stem again from that fear of the Lord, a wise person is going to care about the truth. They're going to seek after and follow after the truth, even if it doesn't line up with what they feel or what they like. Whereas a fool is going to almost always follow after their own heart. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense and helps you to understand where it goes from there when we start talking about foolishness being a corruptive force, a force that is creeping into the heart of the person that has it and begins to affect all of their ways and corrupt them and take them down a dark path. Now, I want to give you a few examples of this in the Bible, and hopefully as we go through it, it'll help you to understand why they go down this path. So Proverbs 24, verse 7 through 9. Proverbs 24, verse 7 says, Wisdom is too high for a fool. He openeth not his mouth in the gate. Now, understand the gate was the place of business and as a place of politics and so forth. The men would sit there above the gate and do a lot of talking. You see that a few times in the Bible. So wisdom is too high for a fool. He opens not his mouth in the gate. He that deviseth to do evil shall be called a mischievous person. The thought of foolishness is sin, and the scorner is an abomination to men. All right, we'll stop there. So understand that the problem for the fool is that wisdom is too high for him. It's too much. It's above him. He can't reach that. And again, heart's the issue. We know that. We can move on beyond that idea to see where this goes. That God says the very thought of foolishness is sin, and that the scorner is an abomination to men. So to be scornful is a sin against your own nature as a man. God didn't design you to feel like you know it all. He designed you to learn and grow throughout your lifetime. That's another statement for another lesson, but I just want to clarify that for anybody who might want to know what that means up front. The thing I really want you to focus on is that idea that the very thought of foolishness is sin. There's two ways you can read that statement, and in reality, I can prove both of them from the Bible. So I don't have a problem with either way you would read it because they're both true. And that is, you could read it that the very thought of foolishness, like when you start to think about foolish things and you start to go in a foolish direction, the very thought of it is sin in the eyes of God. The other direction of that is to say that the very thoughts of a foolish person, their foolish thoughts are always going to lead into sin. Now, I do think primarily what's intended by the verse is the first, that when we begin to think foolishly, it's sin. You see that because it's contrasted against the idea that scornfulness is an abomination. It's a sin against the way we were designed to function. That means that foolishness is a sin against your own thought life. It's, when you begin to think foolish things, it's a sin against your own thoughts, it's a sin against the truth, and so forth. So that the very thought of foolishness is sin. Now, the reason why I say the other way you can read it is true, even though it's not necessarily probably what's meant in this verse, is because you will find that, going back to our text verse of Psalm 53:1, that text passage told you that the issue with the fool is that once someone's heart has been touched by unbelief, they go down this path wherein they lack an ability to properly learn things, and they lack an ability to properly apply what they have learned. So even though they may be highly educated, they may have doctor's degrees and so forth, they're not willing to learn. They're not willing to be taught. They're not willing to receive the truth. So because they become unteachable of the truth, and then that's where scornfulness comes in, and then you accompany that with the foolishness, where you have this person who also, what they do know, they don't know how to apply it. They don't know how to rightly use that. They don't know how to take that information and 1 + 2 is this, and that equals this, and so they don't know how to run down the proper equation. They don't know how to do the math with the information that they have. Knowing that about them, what that sets them on a path for is it sets them on a path of corruption, where their ways and what they're doing, it goes in a way that God says is not good. So that there's none that doeth good. There's none that doeth right. It leads to a path of sin and a path of unrighteousness. That's why the very thought of foolishness is sin in the second sense, which is that foolishness, the way you think when you're foolish, leads into sin. Now, again, I clarify, I do think the intention of the verse is that the very thought of foolishness, like the way you think when you're a foolish person, is sinful. But I do know that there's enough Bible to show that also the direction that foolishness will take you is towards sin. It's always going to gravitate in that direction. So let's then add to that Proverbs 10:23. Proverbs 10 and verse 23 says, "It is as sport to a fool to do mischief, but a man of understanding hath wisdom." So again, understanding and wisdom are coupled in the heart, and they will grow side by side. One may grow faster than the other, same as foolishness and scornfulness. They're coupled together, and one may grow faster than the other. But what's interesting of the verse is it says, "It is as sport to a fool to do mischief." So it's a game to him. It's like going out and playing football. It's about going and playing whatever. It's the same way that you have fun to go do these things. You go out and play some sport. It's fun to you. You enjoy that. Your flesh takes great pleasure in that. He says to the fool to do mischief. And we think of mischief as a light thing. Like we'll see a child who's a little bit naughty and we'll say, okay, they're mischievous. And we'll have a bad opinion of that. We'll have, a small opinion of that, what I mean to say. We'll have a small opinion of this idea that this child is mischievous. We use it as this idea, like I even am guilty of this. I'll say one of my kids, I'll call them mischievous because you can see they have that little grin as they're doing something that's just a little bit mean. And they're doing it just to tease the other one. And we'll call that mischievous. But the truth is, mischief in the Bible is much more malicious. It's much more of an evil thing in the Bible. Usually the word is not used in a light way. It's used in a very deep and dark way. So he's saying that for the fool to do something that they know is going to hurt somebody, it's a sport to them. And this is something that also I don't really have to stretch to illustrate this to you because you've experienced this. You know people who, because of the fact that they don't know how to apply the truth, or maybe they've reached a place where they don't care about the truth, these people who just don't really take these things into account. They don't look at the world and actually judge it and discern and make proper decisions about life. Because of that, it's funny to them. In fact, I guess the easiest way to illustrate this one is just cut on YouTube for 5 seconds and look at any of these influencers, or I guess TikTok's probably where you'd find them now. But these people who get on there and all they do are these pranks, and a lot of times it's evil stuff. I mean, a lot of it's really like hurting. If it was real, most of it's staged and fake. But if it was real, they would really actually be genuinely hurting somebody. They think it's funny to convince someone that their loved one died, or whatever they might come up with. That's foolish. It's foolish to think that that's okay. But what's sad is, to the fool, that's sport. It's fun. It's fun to hurt somebody. It's fun to torture somebody, to make someone feel bad. To the fool, that's a sport. But when there is wisdom in the heart, you begin to consider that it's not good for me to hurt somebody. It's not good for me to play with the truth. It's not. There's some things that's just not right or good for me to do. Wisdom allows you to see that. Foolishness doesn't. So the fool goes down this path where he's lost that ability to realize that some things just shouldn't be played with. I guess I can say it like this, is that I had a friend who, when I was younger, I would mess with my mom, my dad, whatever. I was mischievous in the actual biblical sense of mischievous. I was mean. I didn't mind hurting people. And he put me up to calling my mom and trying to make her think that I would wreck my car or whatever. And the first time I did it, it was a joke. But she told me about how her dad had done that to her. And it really, he told her that her mom had got really seriously injured, possibly was going to die or something of that nature in a car wreck. I don't remember exactly how the story went, but it really, really shook her, and caused her a great emotional distress. And that was, to me, enough to help me realize that that's not something to play with. Genuinely scaring and hurting somebody is not something to play with. The truth is not something to play with. It's okay to joke a little bit. It's okay to play, but there's some things that just shouldn't be played with. And wisdom helps you to see that. Wisdom will help you to come to those conclusions and realize, okay, this is not a joke. This is not funny at this point. Whereas foolishness will make you think it's fun. I enjoy this. It's not me that's getting hurt. It's somebody else that's getting hurt. And so in truth, somebody who doesn't know when to stop joking and doesn't know when to stop playing it, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings who's watching this, but it is a symptom of foolishness in the heart, at least a small amount of it. I'm not calling you a fool if you don't know when to stop joking and when to stop playing, but when you don't see how it affects other people and you don't know when to stop playing, it is a symptom of foolishness. That foolishness is at least trying to grow within the heart. Now, Proverbs 14, verse 8 and verse 9. It says, "The wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. Fools make a mock at sin, but among the righteous there is favor." So let's think of that again. The wisdom of the prudent is to understand his way. So for a wise man, I think I probably will say more about this if I make it to my second point tonight. Is a wise man will look at where he's going and understand his path. He understands the direction this is taking him. But a fool doesn't have that ability to really consider what is the end product of what I'm doing. So because the fool doesn't have that ability to consider what is the end product, what is going to be the end goal, what is the destination of this, for them, they're just living for the moment. They're living for what they're enjoying right now, what they're seeing so many times. That because of this, the fool is deceitful to themselves, to those around them, but it leads to a place where they make a mock at sin. They laugh at it. So not only is it funny to be mischievous, to hurt people, but it also becomes funny to them. It's a joke to them when they see sin. So another symptom of foolishness that you could look at in the heart of somebody is when somebody thinks that sin is funny. If you tell me somebody fell in sin and I laugh at that, that shows me there's a little bit of foolishness in my heart, because I should take that very seriously. If there's wisdom in my heart, it should be a very serious and grave matter to me when we start talking about sin, because I understand that sin is destructive and sin can't be played with. It's something that, if you see a child running with scissors and you laugh at that, there's something wrong with you. If you see a child running with scissors, you should if there's any wisdom in you whatsoever, you should be immediately provoked to stop them and teach them, you don't run with scissors. If you're going to carry scissors, hold them this way, and so forth. The same thing's true of sin. You know it's a destructive force. You know it's evil in the eyes of God. You know it's not something to be trifled or played with. So when there's wisdom in the heart, someone with wisdom should not be able to just laugh at sin and think it's a small thing. It should be a big issue to you. And the fool doesn't regard it that way, because again, the fool is primarily going to be ruled over by their own heart, their own desires, and so forth. So they're not really worried about what is the truth. They don't have a fear of God, so they're not really worried about what is the consequence of sin and so forth. Then Proverbs 19:3. Proverbs 19 and verse 3, the foolish man perverteth his way, and his heart fretteth against the Lord. So here's where you're seeing the next step of that. So we're seeing that at first he don't care about how his decisions affect others. Then he doesn't really care about the sin and the consequences thereof. And then you see that it fretteth against God. Fretteth is to be like irritated against. It bothers you, it upsets you, it grieves you. So he's saying the foolish man perverteth his way. So his way is getting corrupted. His way is becoming twisted and turned away from the truth, which we know is where foolishness is leading to, because foolishness is pushing towards frowardness, wherein the truth is malleable, malleable. It's moldable. You can shape it and make it whatever you want it to be. There's no such thing as absolute truth. It's whatever you want it to be. That's where foolishness is pushing you toward when you reach to frowardness. So he's saying here that to the foolish man, his way is becoming perverted because of the foolishness in his heart. He's twisting his own path. But the thing that stands out that shows you where the problem is in the heart is that his heart fretteth against the Lord. So it's not just that he doesn't care how his decisions affect others, that he doesn't regard the consequences of sin, but also that you're seeing a person who begins to be grieved by God. And that's you see, like if you go back and read Romans 1, you talk about those who've been given over to a reprobate mind, you see a lot of similar ideas and language talked about with them. You see this when you look at people in the world around you. I mean, someone who is an atheist, they get offended by it because you pray to a God they don't believe in. If they really didn't believe in God, then they shouldn't be offended if you believe in him. They shouldn't be offended if you pray to him. The fact that they're offended by your religion, they're offended that you go to church, they're offended that you believe in God, shows you that there's something wrong in their heart. Because wisdom would say this, if you don't believe in God, and this person does, and they're not bothering you, then don't bother them. It's not your business if they believe in God. It's leave them alone. And that's why, like as a soul winner, it's my business to tell people about God, but it's not my business that I can't go force people and beat them, and I can't, try to make it illegal for them to not believe in God. I can't fight with them in such a way. They have their own individual soul liberty. So I go there and I offer to tell them about God, but if they don't want to hear, that's their choice. Wisdom teaches you to respect those things, but the fool is grieved in his heart against God. Because deep down inside, he knows that he's wrong. He just doesn't want to believe it. Then Proverbs 13 and verse 19. Proverbs 13:19 says, the desire accomplished is sweet to the soul, but it is abomination to fools to depart from evil. So understand that when you say abomination, you have to consider it in the light of who is it an abomination to. Because an abomination is a sin against what is natural, what something is created for. So to the fool, in his eyes, it's a sin against his creation, against his intended purpose, his design. Let me make sure I get my words right on how this is expressed. Proverbs 13 and verse 19. The desire accomplishes sweet to the soul, but it is an abomination to fools to depart from evil. So I want to make sure I got that, to depart from evil right. To the fool, it's a sin against his design to depart from evil. For him to turn away from these things that are harmful and destructive, these things that are evil in their nature, to him it's like a sin against his own design. And as a preacher, I understand this. I think most people should understand what that looks like. But as a preacher, I understand what that looks like because so many times when I get up and I begin to preach to people and I'm trying to help them and I'm talking to them about how what they're doing is evil, it's harmful and destructive to them. It is an evil being inflicted upon their own lives and their own souls. They think that I'm the bad guy for telling them that. The very idea that, you, for example, I guess maybe because the use of the word abomination makes you think of this, but the very idea that I would tell a homosexual that he should reconsider the direction his life is going, that he should realize that his life is leading in a destructive direction, I then become the bad guy. And in their eyes, it would be a sin against their nature because I was created that way. I mean, as I was born that way. In their eyes, it would be a sin against their own nature and their own design to depart from that evil and destructive lifestyle. So you see, that's where foolishness leads you to. So that's the thoughts about foolishness being corruption. It is their corruption. It is a path that they go down to where little by little, every filter, every layer that's intended to be there to keep you from being this destructive force in your own life and in the life of others is peeled away, so that in the end, there's none that doeth good. There's none that doeth righteous. They don't care about how it's going to affect others. They don't regard the evilness of what they're doing and the fact that sin has consequences. They are upset with God that God would dare have an opinion about what they're doing. They're eventually reach a place where the idea of them changing or them being wrong about something becomes an abomination in their eyes. A sin against their own design. They believe that I was born this way, and who are you to question that? And it's not just homosexuals. I mean, I know alcoholics are told it's a disease and you're born this way and so forth. But that you would dare tell somebody to take a step back from sin, you become the bad guy, and it's an abomination that you would ask somebody to change that. So that you see they go down this path to where that foolishness, that inability to connect the dots and come to the right conclusion, leads them down a path where they deceive themselves and make themselves feel okay with whatever they're doing, and it corrupts them. Then, because it corrupts them, we see it's also their destruction. So we'll go back to Psalm 53 because that was our text passage. We'll use that as our skeleton for all of this. So Psalm 53, I'll just read verse 4 and 5. It says, "Have the workers of iniquity no knowledge, who eat up my people as they eat bread? They have not called upon God. There were they in great fear, where no fear was. For God hath scattered the bones of him that encampeth against thee. Thou hast put them to shame, because God hath despised them." So you see, it not only corrupts them, but it eventually will destroy them. Eventually, it's going to put them on a collision course with God, where God's going to have to deal with things. That's what's being pointed to within the verse, within the passage here, is that those who in their heart don't regard God, they don't fear God, their heart is ruled over by that unbelief, will dwell, they'll roll into foolishness, and as they follow that path, if they continue down it, they'll go into frowardness. And because they first lose the ability, or they fail to have an ability to know how to apply their knowledge and to seek after the truth, they'll eventually get to a place where they don't care about the truth, and they're not trying to make the right conclusions. They're just trying to justify and defend what they believe and convince others to go along with them. So that's going to put them on a collision course with God. So that's not just their corruption, it is their destruction as well. So with that, let's give a few verses to support that idea. Proverbs 10 and verse 21 says, "The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for a want of wisdom." So that lack of wisdom is eventually going to kill them. It's going to be their downfall. It's going to be the thing that destroys them, is what this says. And that's a pretty straightforward and simple statement. And I think with the context of everything I've said up till now in this study, you can understand why. Because they don't know how to apply their knowledge. Eventually, they're going to get in trouble because they're going down a dark path, and it's going to destroy them. Then Proverbs 14 again. And I'll tell you, if you notice some of these chapters that I've been to, like 14 and 13, you actually could read the chapter and get a lot more about foolishness, because it actually talks about foolishness a lot across some of these chapters. But Proverbs 14 and verse 16 says, "A wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated." So what did he tell us about the fool? The fool, he asked him, do you not have any knowledge? You don't know where this is going. You don't know what's going on. What do you not know? There's a lack of information there. And the truth is, we know that in reality with foolishness, it's not necessarily so much the lack of information. And you see that this is intended in the verse as well, if you pay attention to the way the question is being asked. It's not so much that they lack information as they lack the ability to use that information. They don't know how to apply it. So it looks like they don't know anything because they're not using what they know. They're using what they feel and so forth. So, what we're seeing here in Proverbs 14 is that a wise man, because he fears evil, he realizes that evil is not something to be played with. You can't mess with some things. There's some things that you just shouldn't touch. You shouldn't taste, not touch, not handle, not the unclean thing. And so, because of that, he departs from evil. But the fool is confident. The fool thinks that they've got it all figured out. That's where scornfulness and foolishness meet together. Is you have this person who's scornful and they feel like they've got it all figured out. They're going in that direction of a proud and haughty spirit. And so, because they feel like they have it all figured out and they're confident in their decision making and their abilities, they press on, even though the path that they're pressing on is one that will destroy them. Evil is destructive. So is sin. And so, because of this, they're pushing down a path that is going to be their destruction. And that's why he says, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly. So he's even giving you an illustration, an idea of what this looked like. That, someone who is ruled by their emotions, by their tempers and so forth, they're going to behave foolishly, because emotional decision making is typically going to be foolish decision making that's not built on facts and information and truth and God's word and so forth is typically going to be foolish decision making. And that's what you're seeing in this idea. Proverbs 13:23 says, much food is in the tillage of the poor, but that is destroyed for want of judgment. So we know judgment to be one of the building blocks of wisdom. And we're being told here that, there's much food for the poor who go and work. If he'll go and work, he'll have food. That's just, these two thoughts are tied together, but I'm not really looking to build on that one so much as it is this statement. But that is destroyed for want of judgment. So he says there's some who aren't able to understand. They're not able to take that knowledge and apply it. They're not able to, judge and make the right decision on this, that if I'm poor and I want food, then I need to go work. I need to go do something. There's some who are not able to take that logical conclusion and, put two and two together and come to that. And so because of that, they're destroyed because they lack that judgment. So when we lack judgment, we lack wisdom, we don't have the ability to see where this is going and make the right decisions. It is a destructive force in our life. Proverbs 12 and verse 15 says, a man shall be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the recompense of a man's hand shall be rendered unto him. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. So again, the issue of the fool is he doesn't really care. He doesn't regard or fear the direction his path is going, because in his eyes, he's not looking at the evil that could come from this. He's not looking down the road and seeing where he could go. He's looking at the fact that to him, he feels like this is the right way to go. He feels like this is the right thing. My heart is telling me I should go this way. I feel pushed to go this way, so forth. And he's not actually looking at it regarding the consequences, or the potential consequences, at least, of going down that path. So because the fool sees his way is right, he's not willing to consider in regard to the fact that it may not be right. And so it's leading him in the path of destruction. Proverbs 8, verse 33. Proverbs 8 and verse 33 says, hear instruction and be wise, and refuse it not. Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the post of my doors. Whoso findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. Now let's talk about wisdom. Wisdom is saying that anyone who hates wisdom, understand that Proverbs is personifying wisdom. So it's giving wisdom a voice and letting wisdom talk like a person. And there's a lot of really good information, but I really want you to take out that idea, really hold on to that the people who hate wisdom, who hate to properly apply knowledge and to use the information the right way, they love death. It's going to lead to death. It's going to lead to destruction. Then Proverbs 16 is the last verse I wrote down on here. Proverbs 16, 22 through 25 says, understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, and addeth learning to his lips. Pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. There's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of destruction, or the ways of death. I'm sorry, there's another verse that says destruction. So that's my last verse I have on this, to just make the point that because the fool is following his own heart, he doesn't regard God, he's not concerned about the truth, he doesn't even know how to apply the truth that he does have. And so, because of this, he's just following after his heart. He's not even following after his own education, his own knowledge. He's following after his own heart. He's following what feels good to him, because the fool trusteth in his own heart. And because of this, there's a way that seemeth right to a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. When we follow after our heart and we follow after our feelings instead of following after the truth and following after what's right, we will lead ourselves into a path that is destructive. We're going to hurt ourselves. We're going to destroy ourselves. And that's what you're seeing about the fool. So the folly of the fool, the manifestation of his foolishness, where you can see it, you see where it's going, is that it's first going to corrupt him. It's going to take whatever potential of good was there. As you go down this path, whatever potential the person had to be good is going to be stripped away little by little, corrupting them so that there's none good, no, not one. And we understand this to be a principle applied to everyone because we have a sin nature. But in the context, we understand what he's saying as well, that this is really dealing with the fool, that the fool is as he's going down his path, he's stripping himself of any potential to do good so that there's none good. And let me mention, as I get ready to close, as I'm trying to close up my thoughts here, if you have a question, go ahead and be typing it out, and I'll try to answer it really quick. But then you see, once it's corrupted his path and corrupted his heart, and pushed him towards beyond foolishness, towards frowardness, so that he no longer, it's just that he doesn't know how to apply knowledge, and he's not able to see the truth, that he doesn't care about the truth, and he doesn't care about trying to apply his knowledge, that eventually it's going to lead to destruction. Because when we don't regard the truth and we're not interested in what's right and what's wrong, and we head down this path, eventually that path is going to destroy us. Because when we follow after our heart is foolish, it's not going to make the right decisions, and it's going to get us in trouble. You think about that. Any decision you've ever made, that you did it because your heart was pushing you to do it, not the Holy Spirit, not truth, not the Bible, or so forth, you've got yourself in trouble. We have to make sure that it's really that you're looking at this, and that God is the one pushing you in the right direction. All right. So now, saying that, you see the contrast you have to look at. Is wisdom or is it foolishness? What's pushing me? Is God helping me to make the right decision, go in the right direction, or am I following after my heart? You have to make that. You have to look at that and understand the difference between the two. Make the right decision and what is what you should be doing, what you should be following after. With that, I'm looking to see if I have any questions. I don't see any questions coming in. I see people have had conversations up to this point, but. Funny says Disney always says follow your heart. All the world says follow your heart. All the music says trust your heart, listen to your heart. In terms of Disney, I guess I'll always remember Mulan and the song. I think that's where the song "Be True to Your Heart" comes from. I grew up on Disney, and I have a fantastic memory for the stuff that I shouldn't remember. The most unimportant things I'll remember for the rest of my life, I think. Whenever I reference that, I do think about the fact that Disney always tells you to follow your heart and let your heart be your guide. I believe it was Pinocchio and so forth. But I'll always think about that. You mentioned wondering if concentration fits into the start of wisdom, where concentration falls in all this. I would say that concentration probably stems somewhere in the products that come with wisdom. If anything, it's going to fall under the category maybe of instruction. And instruction is a little bit of an oddity in this, is that instruction falls both under the ideas of knowledge, and there's certain parts of it that fall underneath wisdom as instruction, and instruction is where we begin to receive information. So the truth is, as somebody grows in wisdom, it should help to produce a better ability to focus and to concentrate. But in reality, the majority of your ability to concentrate is going to come down to discipline. And now wisdom will help with that. Wisdom will really, really help with it. But a lot of the ability to concentrate is going to come down to discipline. It's going to come down to teaching yourself how to focus and how to pay better attention. I mean, Lori laughs at me if I mention anything about any kind of stuff. She made fun of me for saying I was dyslexic the other day, even though I am dyslexic. If you paid attention, you'll have noticed that there's a couple numbers, especially where I'm a little bit tired. There's several numbers that I started to read backwards and had to correct myself throughout this video. But she'll make fun of me for that. Now, the one diagnosis that I ever received in my life that I refused to just accept it and go on with it was when they also said that had ADHD. And I, even before I was a Christian, before any of that, I refused to accept that. And I just refused to be labeled as such. So it's on my record, I guess, but I refused to buy it. And for me, there were things. I mean, even with dyslexia, I mean, I struggle with reading. The truth is, I don't know if people realize this, but the way I read is actually closer to the way your phone does predictive text. You'll notice that there's some passages I can read really fast, and there's some passages that I trip and I have to go back and correct myself. And the reasoning for that is because the better I know a passage, I've memorized them. So, for example, Philippians 4, the reason why I could read that super fast the other day, even when you're getting to list, is because I memorized that. But when you get to other passages, I've not necessarily memorized the passage, I've memorized the idea of certain passages, or I just have a basic understanding of the common structure of a sentence. So like in the book of Psalms, normally if this is said, then this is what will follow. And so the way your phone would use predictive text to do that, I kind of read with that way. And you'll notice, if you pay attention, once you know that about me, you'll notice that, because you'll see when I'm messing up is because I said something that I assumed would have been the next word. But when my mind actually caught up to where I was reading, I realized that was not the next word. Now, I'm explaining that to show that there are ways to work around things like concentration problems. There's ways to work around things like legitimate issues of dyslexia or so forth. You can, with God's help, with time and with discipline, you can get past a lot of that stuff. So for me, with struggling with concentration, one of the biggest things that helped me was to find ways to really just focus and study without distractions, to get alone and spend some time studying without things to distract me. And over time, developing that habit helped me to get out of the habit of being so easily distracted. It helped me to learn to not be so much. I mean, it's something that you'll still struggle from time to time. I mean, you see that you go to my church, I struggle with being distracted sometimes. So it's not something that's a perfect solution, but it is something that will help you as you grow in wisdom and as you discipline yourself to not be so easily distracted. You will not be so distracted. I mentioned Pinocchio, and so Nick says Pinocchio is forbidden in most Islamic countries. I didn't know that. I'm glad I'm not in an Islamic country, so it doesn't affect me, but I didn't know that. So that's news for me. All right. I don't see any other questions coming in. Hope that, okay, Stefani says one more thing. So I assume I got another question. Hope my answer about concentration helps a little bit. I think we'll take one more question. I don't want to go past the 50-minute mark if I don't have to. So I think we'll take the one more question. Unless somebody has a question I can answer fairly quickly. Stefani's making fun of my thing that Eli gave me back there behind my head on my bookshelf. That's on my bookshelf because I chose to put it there. So there's no amount of books that would cover that because I chose to stick it there because I actually like it. But anyways, I also like my picture, and the cross there is something that somebody made and gave to Lori. It was handmade by one of the wives of one of my supporting pastors. Up there at the top, if you look, you'll notice a chin. That's a picture of me and Lori. And to the side of that is actually my ordination certificate. So most things on my shelf actually have a purpose, except for some of the books. Some of the books are just there because they look nice. A lot of Bibles are there because people have given them to me. And I don't read my Bible in Spanish, but I have a Spanish Bible because I preached at a Spanish church for a long time. And they really love me and I love them. And so when I'd been preaching for them for a while, they went out and bought me a Bible that was a parallel of the King James and one of the Spanish translations and gave that to me. Some of the other books are sentimental. And the Bible that's still in the box is actually my ordination Bible. When I was ordained, all the pastors that were part of that council that questioned me and went through the process, they all bought me a Bible and signed their names in it, and wrote some verses in there for me. So that's a Bible that's got a lot of sentimental value. And if you see the word Strong's, that's the Strong's Concordance. It's a book that helps you to look up words in the Bible. And that was actually the gift my grandma gave me when I started preaching. So, and that one says country is a gift from Brother Ron Ralph's church. So, all right. I don't know if that matters or if you even cared, but since I was talking about what's on my bookshelf, I thought I'd go ahead and answer a few questions about that before anybody has a chance to ask them. But I'm not going to go through every book over there because it doesn't matter. Okay, thank you for being here to be part of the service with us. I don't see any other questions coming in. Hope I was able to answer your questions. I hope that there was some help, some better understanding as you walk away from this as to foolishness and the danger of it. And so I appreciate you being here to learn this with us. As we continue this study, we'll probably talk more about foolishness in the next study of this as well. And so we'll probably be on foolishness for at least one more week. I don't know if we have to do 3 weeks of that like we did wisdom, but probably for one more week we might talk about foolishness. We'll see. But thank you for joining us and being a part of it. Nick explained to us that the reason why Pinocchio is banned in Muslim countries is because Geppetto is considered to have created life. But there's one correction of that. I guess the blue fairy creates life in Pinocchio. Because again, I know way too much about this stuff because I don't even remember. I don't think I've watched Pinocchio. Maybe I watched a little bit of it with Josiah, but I don't think I've watched Pinocchio since I was like 4 years old or 5 years old at the most. But I still remember that much. All right. So thank you for being here. No more Pinocchio. We're done with that tonight. Have a good evening, and we hope to see you at church tomorrow. We thank you for taking time out to be with us.